The word of the Lord came to me. Thus begins the most prophetic book in Scripture, Ezekiel, where the heavens split open and eternity invades time. This is no ordinary prophecy. Here, God's glory departs from his own temple. Dead nations rise from ancient graves, and a valley of dry bones breathes again with resurrection power. Ezekiel doesn't just predict the future. He lives it, breathes it, and demonstrates it through signs that defy human understanding. Every vision points to the same stunning truth. The God of Israel is sovereignly orchestrating history toward one climactic moment when his presence will fill the earth. From Babylon's exile to the final temple, this prophet unveils the divine blueprint that governs nations, reveals the heart of God, and declares the ultimate destiny of creation itself. It was the 5th year since King Jehoiakim had been taken to Babylon. Ezekiel, a 30-year-old priest, sat by the Kibar River among thousands of other Jewish exiles. This should have been the year he began serving in the temple back home, but instead he found himself in a foreign land, watching the waters flow past his broken dreams. Then the heavens opened. In chapter 1, verse 4, Ezekiel saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning and surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal. This wasn't just weather. This was the arrival of something beyond earthly understanding. From within the fire came 4 living creatures. Each had a human form, but with 4 faces, the face of a human, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. They had 4 wings each, with 2 wings spread out for flying and 2 covering their bodies. Their legs were straight, and their feet sparkled like burnished bronze. Under their wings were human hands. These beings moved without turning, going straight ahead wherever the Spirit wanted them to go. Their wings made a sound like rushing waters, like the voice of the Almighty himself. When they stopped, they lowered their wings, and a voice came from above the vault over their heads. Beside each creature was a wheel that touched the ground. These wheels were unlike anything Ezekiel had ever seen. They sparkled like topaz and had a wheel intersecting a wheel. The rims of all 4 wheels were full of eyes all around. When the creatures moved, the wheels moved. When the creatures rose from the ground, the wheels rose too, because the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. Above the creatures was an expanse, sparkling like crystal and awesome to see. Above this expanse was what looked like a throne made of lapis lazuli. On the throne was a figure like that of a man, glowing like amber from his waist up and like fire from his waist down. Brilliant light surrounded him, like the appearance of a rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord, Ezekiel recorded. When he saw it, he fell face down, and he heard the voice of one speaking. The voice from the throne called to him with words that would define his entire ministry. "Son of man, stand up on your feet and I will speak to you." As soon as God spoke in chapter 2, verse 2, the Spirit came into me and raised me to my feet, and I heard him speaking to me. God's first words revealed the difficulty of Ezekiel's calling. "I am sending you to the Israelites, to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their ancestors have been in revolt against me to this very day. The people to whom I am sending you are obstinate and stubborn." This wasn't going to be easy. God warned Ezekiel that these people wouldn't want to hear what he had to say. But the success of his mission wouldn't depend on their response. It would depend on his faithfulness to deliver God's message exactly as given. Say to them, "This is what the sovereign Lord says," and whether they listen or fail to listen, for they are a rebellious people, they will know that a prophet has been among them. To prepare Ezekiel for the opposition he would face, God filled him with courage. "Do not be afraid of them or their words. Do not be afraid, though briars and thorns are all around you and you live among scorpions. Do not be afraid of what they say or be terrified by them, though they are a rebellious people. You must speak my words to them, whether they listen or fail to listen, for they are rebellious." The commission was clear and non-negotiable. Ezekiel would be God's voice to a people who had stopped listening to heaven. His job was to speak, not to convince. Their response would be their responsibility, but his faithfulness would determine his own standing before God. In chapter 3, God showed Ezekiel something that would forever change how he understood his role as a prophet. A hand appeared before him holding a scroll. It was unrolled so he could see both sides, and it was covered with words of lament and mourning and woe. This wasn't a message of hope. It was a scroll filled with judgment and sorrow. "Son of man, eat what is before you, eat this scroll, then go and speak to the people of Israel," God commanded. Ezekiel opened his mouth, and God gave him the scroll to eat. The taste surprised him completely. It tasted as sweet as honey in my mouth. How could words of judgment taste sweet? Because they were God's words, and for a true prophet, carrying the exact message from heaven is sweeter than anything else, even when that message brings pain. The sweetness wasn't in the content, but in the privilege of being chosen to speak for the Creator of the universe. After eating the scroll, God explained more about Ezekiel's mission. "Son of man, go now to the people of Israel and speak my words to them. You are not being sent to a people of obscure speech and strange language, but to the people of Israel." Ironically, it would have been easier to preach to foreigners who didn't know God than to his own people who had rejected what they knew to be true. The people of Israel are not willing to listen to you because they are not willing to listen to me, for all the Israelites are hardened and obstinate. But I will make you as unyielding and hardened as they are. I will make your forehead like the hardest stone, harder than flint. Do not be afraid of them or terrified by them, though they are a rebellious people. Then the Spirit lifted Ezekiel up, and he heard behind him a loud rumbling sound as the glory of the Lord rose from the place where it was standing. It was the sound of the wings of the living creatures brushing against each other, and the sound of the wheels beside them. The Spirit took him away to Tel Aviv, where the exiles lived by the Kebar River. For 7 days, Ezekiel sat among them, completely overwhelmed by everything he had experienced. The weight of his calling pressed down on him as he processed what it meant to be God's spokesman to such a rebellious people. After those 7 days, God spoke to him again with a specific role that would define his ministry. "Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the people of Israel. So hear the word I speak and give them warning from me." Like a guard on a city wall who watches for approaching enemies and sounds the alarm, Ezekiel would be responsible for warning both the wicked and the righteous about what was coming. In chapter 4, God told Ezekiel to do something that would capture everyone's attention. He was to take a clay tablet, draw the city of Jerusalem on it, and then build a model siege around it. This wasn't just an art project, it was a prophetic demonstration of what was coming. Put siege works against it, build a ramp up to it, set up camps against it, and put battering rams around it, God instructed. Then Ezekiel was to take an iron cooking pan and place it as an iron wall between himself and the city. "Turn your face toward it, and it will be under siege, and you shall besiege it. This will be a sign to the people of Israel." But the most difficult part of this demonstration was yet to come. God told Ezekiel to lie on his left side and symbolically bear the sin of the people of Israel. "I have assigned you the same number of days as the years of their sin. So for 390 days you will bear the sin of the people of Israel." After those 390 days, he was to turn over and lie on his right side for 40 more days to bear the sin of Judah. "I have assigned you 1 day for each year," God explained. In total, Ezekiel would spend 430 days, more than 14 months, lying on his sides beside this clay model of Jerusalem under siege. During this entire time, he was to keep his face turned toward the siege and prophesy against the city with his arm bared for action. To make sure he completed the full demonstration, God said, I will tie you with ropes so that you cannot turn from one side to the other until you have finished the days of your siege. The food situation made the demonstration even more realistic and disturbing. God told him to take wheat, barley, beans, lentils, millet, and spelt, put them in a storage jar, and make bread from them. He was to eat only 20 shekels of food each day, about 8 ounces, and drink only a sixth of a hin of water, less than 2 cups. This was the diet of a city under siege, where every bite of food and sip of water becomes precious. To make the demonstration even more shocking, God initially told Ezekiel to cook his food over human waste. When Ezekiel protested, "Not so, sovereign Lord. I have never defiled myself," God allowed him to use cow dung instead. But the message remained clear. The people of Israel would eat defiled food among the nations where they would be scattered. For over a year, people would walk by and see this respected priest lying motionless beside his clay model of Jerusalem, eating tiny portions of food and drinking small amounts of water. The siege wasn't just coming someday, it was happening right before their eyes in dramatic, unforgettable form. When the 430 days were finally complete, God gave Ezekiel another dramatic sign that would shock everyone who saw it. In chapter 5, he was commanded to take a sharp sword and use it as a barber's razor to shave off all his hair and beard. For a priest, this was almost unthinkable. Their hair was a symbol of their consecration to God, but God had a specific purpose for every strand. Ezekiel was to take scales and divide all the hair into 3 equal parts. 1/3 he was to burn with fire inside the model city when the days of siege were completed. Another 1/3 he was to strike with the sword all around the city. The final 1/3 he was to scatter to the wind, and God promised to pursue it with drawn sword. He was allowed to take just a few strands and tie them in the folds of his garment, but even some of these would be thrown into the fire. From there, a fire will come out into all Israel, God declared. Each portion of hair represented the terrible fate awaiting Jerusalem's people. God explained the meaning with devastating clarity. "This is Jerusalem, which I have set in the center of the nations, with countries all around her. Yet in her wickedness she has rebelled against my laws and decrees more than the nations and countries around her. She has rejected my laws and has not followed my decrees." The burning hair showed how 1/3 of the people would die by plague and famine inside the city during the siege. The hair struck with the sword represented those who would fall by violence around the city. The scattered hair revealed how the survivors would be dispersed to every nation, with God's sword of judgment pursuing them even in exile. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says: "I myself am against you, Jerusalem, and I will inflict punishment on you in the sight of the nations. Because of all your detestable idols, I will do to you what I have never done before and will never do again. Therefore in your midst, parents will eat their children, and children will eat their parents. The judgment would be so severe and unprecedented that it would shock even the surrounding nations. Fathers would eat their own children, and children their fathers, because of the desperate famine during the siege. The few survivors would be scattered to every wind, and God would pursue them with drawn sword. Jerusalem, which had been placed by God as a jewel among the nations, would become a ruin and a reproach among the nations around you, in the sight of all who pass by. The city that was meant to be a light to the world would become a warning of what happens when people persist in rebellion against their Creator. In chapter 6, the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel with a message directed at the mountains of Israel. These weren't just geographical features. They were the locations where Israel had built high places and altars to worship false gods instead of coming to the temple in Jerusalem. Son of man, set your face against the mountains of Israel. Prophesy against them and say, "You mountains of Israel, hear the word of the sovereign Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to the mountains and hills, to the ravines and valleys. I'm about to bring a sword against you, and I will destroy your high places." These high places represented Israel's spiritual adultery. Instead of worshipping God at the place he had chosen, the people scattered across the mountains to bow down before idols and foreign gods. Every hilltop and valley had become a place of rebellion against heaven. God's judgment would be thorough and devastating. Your altars will be demolished, and your incense altars will be smashed. And I will slay your people in front of your idols. I will lay the dead bodies of the Israelites in front of their idols, and I will scatter your bones around your altars. The irony was perfect and terrible. The people who had chosen to worship dead idols would themselves become corpses, lying before those same lifeless images. The altars where they had offered sacrifices to false gods would be surrounded by their own bones. Wherever you live, the towns will be laid waste and the high places demolished, so that your altars will be laid waste and devastated. Your idols smashed and ruined, your incense altars broken down, and what you have made wiped out. Your people will fall slain among you, and you will know that I am the Lord. But even in the midst of this devastating judgment, God would preserve a remnant. Yet I will spare some, for some of you will escape the sword when you are scattered among the lands and nations. Then in the nations where they have been carried captive, those who escape will remember me. These survivors would finally understand what their rebellion had cost them. They would remember how I have been grieved by their adulterous hearts, which have turned away from me, and by their eyes, which have lusted after their idols. They will loathe themselves for the evil they have done, and for all their detestable practices. The mountains that had witnessed their rebellion would also witness their punishment. But ultimately, these same mountains would see their recognition of who God really is. Then they will know that I am the Lord, and that I did not threaten in vain to bring this calamity on them. Chapter 7 brought one of the most urgent and terrifying prophecies in Ezekiel's entire ministry. The word of the Lord came with a message that could not be misunderstood. The end. The end has come upon the four corners of the land. Now the end is upon you, and I will unleash my anger against you. This wasn't a warning about some distant future judgment. This was an announcement that the time of reckoning had finally arrived. God had been patient for generations, sending prophet after prophet to call his people back. But their persistent rebellion had exhausted his patience, and now the moment of final judgment was at hand. I will judge you according to your conduct and repay you for all your detestable practices. I will not look on you with pity. I will not spare you. I will repay you for your conduct and for the detestable practices among you. Then you will know that I am the Lord. The repetition was relentless and terrifying. Disaster. Unheard of disaster. See, it comes. The end has come. The end has come. It has roused itself against you. It has come. Doom has come upon you who dwell in the land. Everything the people had trusted in would fail them completely. The time had come. The day was near. A day of panic, not of rejoicing on the mountains. Soon God would pour out his wrath and spend his anger against them. He would judge them according to their conduct and repay them for all their detestable practices. Their economic system would collapse overnight. They will throw their silver into the streets, and their gold will be treated as a thing unclean. Their silver and gold will not be able to deliver them in the day of the Lord's wrath. It will not satisfy their hunger or fill their stomachs, for it has caused them to stumble into sin. Money that had once seemed so important would become worthless trash in the face of divine judgment. The wealth they had accumulated through oppression and corruption would not buy them even a moment of safety when God's anger was unleashed. Even the temple itself would not escape. They took pride in their beautiful jewelry and used it to make their detestable idols and images. Therefore I will give it into the hands of foreigners as plunder and to the wicked of the earth as loot, and they will defile it. Violence filled the land, and the city was full of bloodshed. The worst of nations would come and take possession of their houses. The pride of the mighty would be brought low, and their sacred places would be desecrated. Terror would come, and they would seek peace but find none. Calamity upon calamity will come, and rumor upon rumor. They will go searching for a vision from the prophet. Priestly instruction in the law will cease. The council of the elders will come to an end. The king will mourn, the prince will be clothed with despair, and the hands of the people of the land will tremble. In the end, God would deal with them according to their own conduct and judge them by their own standards. The justice they had denied to others would be the same justice applied to them. Then they will know that I am the Lord. On the 5th day of the 6th month, in the 6th year of exile, Ezekiel was sitting in his house with the elders of Judah when the hand of the sovereign Lord came on him. In chapter 8, he looked up and saw a figure like fire. From what appeared to be his waist down, it was like fire, and from there up it looked like glowing metal. This figure reached out what looked like a hand and took Ezekiel by the hair of his head. The Spirit lifted him up between earth and heaven and brought him in visions to Jerusalem, to the entrance of the north gate of the inner court. There he saw the idol that provokes to jealousy. The glory of the God of Israel was there, just as he had seen it by the Kibar River. But God wanted to show him why this glory would soon depart. "Son of man, look toward the north." When Ezekiel looked, there at the entrance north of the gate of the altar was this idol of jealousy. "Son of man." Do you see what they are doing? The utterly detestable things the Israelites are doing here, things that will drive me far from my sanctuary. But you will see things that are even more detestable. God brought him to the entrance of the court and showed him a hole in the wall. "Son of man, now dig into the wall." When Ezekiel dug into the wall, he found a doorway. "Go in and see the wicked and detestable things they are doing here." Inside this secret chamber, Ezekiel saw portrayed on the walls all kinds of crawling things and unclean animals and all the idols of Israel. 70 elders of Israel were standing before these images, each with a censer in his hand, and a fragrant cloud of incense was rising. These were the leaders of the people, the ones who should have been protecting true worship, instead worshipping animals and idols in secret. They said among themselves, "The Lord does not see us. The Lord has forsaken the land." But God saw everything, and their secret worship was driving him from his own house. There was more to see. God brought him to the entrance of the north gate of the house of the Lord, where women were sitting weeping for the god Tammuz. Then he brought him into the inner court of the house of the Lord, where at the entrance to the temple, between the portico and the altar, were about 25 men. They had their backs toward the temple of the Lord and their faces toward the east, and they were bowing down to the sun in the east. Have you seen this, Son of Man? Is it a trivial matter for the people of Judah to do the detestable things they are doing here? Must they also fill the land with violence and continually arouse my anger? Look at them putting the branch to their nose. In chapter 9, God called out in a loud voice, "Bring near those who are appointed to execute judgment on the city, each with a weapon in his hand." 6 men came from the direction of the upper gate, which faces north, each with a deadly weapon in his hand. With them was a man clothed in linen who had a writing kit at his side. "Go throughout the city of Jerusalem and put a mark on the foreheads of those who grieve and lament over all the detestable things that are done in it," God told the man in linen. To the others he said, "Follow him through the city and kill, without showing pity or compassion. Slaughter the old men, the young men and women, the mothers and children, but do not touch anyone who has the mark. Begin at my sanctuary." So they began with the old men who were in front of the temple. The judgment would start at God's house because that's where the worst rebellion had taken place. In chapter 10, Ezekiel witnessed the most heartbreaking scene of all. Above the vault over the heads of the cherubim appeared something like a throne of lapis lazuli. God spoke to the man clothed in linen, "Go in among the wheels beneath the cherubim, fill your hands with burning coals from among the cherubim, and scatter them over the city." The glory of the Lord rose from above the cherubim and moved to the threshold of the temple. The temple was filled with the cloud, and the court was full of the radiance of the glory of the Lord. The sound of the wings of the cherubim could be heard as far away as the outer court. like the voice of God Almighty when he speaks. Then came the moment that changed everything. The glory of the Lord departed from over the threshold of the temple and stopped above the cherubim. While Ezekiel watched, the cherubim spread their wings and rose from the ground, and the wheels went up with them. They stopped at the entrance of the east gate of the Lord's house, and the glory of the God of Israel was above them. God's presence, which had filled Solomon's temple for centuries, was leaving. The building that had been the center of the world's worship, the place where heaven touched earth, was being abandoned. The glory that had made this temple the most sacred place on earth was departing, leaving behind only empty walls and the echo of broken promises. While Ezekiel was still in his vision of Jerusalem, the Spirit took him to the east gate of the Lord's house. There at the entrance of the gate were 25 men, and among them he saw 2 leaders who were giving wicked advice to the city. In chapter 11, verse 2, God said to him, "Son of man, these are the men who are plotting evil and giving wicked advice in this city." These leaders were telling the people not to worry about building houses because Jerusalem was like a cooking pot that would protect them from the fire of judgment. They thought the city walls would keep them safe no matter what they did. But God had a different message for Ezekiel to deliver. Therefore prophesy against them. "Prophesy, Son of Man," the Lord commanded. As soon as Ezekiel began to speak, the Spirit of the Lord came on him and told him exactly what to say. "This is what the Lord says. That is what you are saying, you leaders in Israel, but I know what is going through your mind." God knew their thoughts and their plans. He knew they were leading the people into more sin instead of calling them to repentance. "You have killed many people in this city and filled its streets with the dead. Therefore this is what the sovereign Lord says. The bodies you have thrown there are the meat, and this city is the pot. But I will drive you out of it." The very metaphor they used to feel secure would become the picture of their judgment. The pot they thought would protect them would become the place where their victims lay dead, while they themselves would be driven out to face punishment outside the city walls. As Ezekiel was prophesying, something shocking happened. Pelatiah, son of Benaiah, one of the leaders, suddenly died. Ezekiel was so overwhelmed that he fell face down and cried out, "Alas, sovereign Lord, will you completely destroy the remnant of Israel?" But God's response brought unexpected hope. Even though judgment was coming on the wicked leaders, he had not forgotten his people who were already in exile. In verse 13, the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel with a promise that would sustain the exiles for generations. "Son of man, the people of Jerusalem have said of your fellow exiles and all the other Israelites, they are far away from the Lord. This land was given to us as our possession." The people still in Jerusalem thought that because they hadn't been taken to Babylon yet, they were somehow more blessed than the exiles. They believed the land belonged to them now. But God had a completely different perspective on who his true people were. Therefore say, "This is what the sovereign Lord says. Although I sent them far away among the nations and scattered them among the countries, yet for a little while I have been a sanctuary for them in the countries where they have gone." Even in exile, God himself had become their sanctuary. They didn't need the temple building because they had the presence of God himself. Then came the promise that would echo through the centuries. "I will gather you from the nations and bring you back from the countries where you have been scattered, and I will give you back the land of Israel again. They will return to it and remove from it all its vile images and detestable idols." But the restoration wouldn't just be physical. It would be spiritual too. "I will give them an undivided heart and put a new spirit in them. I will remove from them their heart of stone and give them a heart of flesh. Then they will follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. They will be my people, and I will be their God." This wasn't just about getting their land back. God promised to change their very nature, to give them hearts that could truly love and obey him, instead of hearts of stone that resisted his will. In chapter 12, the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel with instructions for another dramatic demonstration. This time, he would act out the coming exile of Jerusalem's leadership, especially focusing on what would happen to the king. Son of man, you are living among a rebellious people. They have eyes to see but do not see, and ears to hear but do not hear, for they are a rebellious people. Therefore, Son of man, pack your belongings for exile, and in the daytime as they watch, set out and go from your place to another. Ezekiel was to pack like someone being forced to leave their home forever, taking only what an exile could carry. During the day, while everyone could see what he was doing, he was to bring out his belongings as if going into exile. Then in the evening, he was to do something even more dramatic. In the evening, while they are watching, go out like those who go into exile. While they watch, dig through the wall and take your belongings out through it. Put them on your shoulder as they are watching, and carry them out at dusk. Cover your face, so that you cannot see the land, for I have made you a sign to the Israelites. So Ezekiel did exactly what the Lord commanded. During the day, he brought out his belongings packed for exile. Then in the evening, he dug through the wall with his hands and carried his things out at dusk, covering his face as he went. The next morning, people came asking what this strange performance meant. In verse 9, the word of the Lord came to him, Son of man, did not the Israelites, that rebellious people, ask you, what are you doing? God told him to explain the meaning clearly. Say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. This prophecy concerns the prince in Jerusalem and all the Israelites who are there. Say to them, I am a sign to you. As I have done, so it will be done to them. They will go into exile as captives. The prince was King Zedekiah, and Ezekiel's actions showed exactly what would happen to him. The prince among them will put his things on his shoulder at dusk and leave, and a hole will be dug in the wall for him to go through. He will cover his face so that he cannot see the land. This wasn't just about the king leaving the city. It was about a failed escape attempt. Zedekiah would try to flee Jerusalem in secret, but his plan would fail completely. I will spread my net for him, and he will be caught in my snare. I will bring him to Babylonia, the land of the Chaldeans, but he will not see it, and there he will die. The prophecy about not seeing the land, even though he would die there, seemed like a riddle, but it would be fulfilled in a terrible way. Zedekiah would be captured, his eyes would be put out, and then he would be taken to Babylon, where he would die, without ever seeing the land of his captivity. I will scatter to the winds all those around him, his staff and all his troops, and I will pursue them with drawn sword. Even his helpers and soldiers wouldn't escape the judgment that was coming, but God would leave a few survivors for a specific purpose. I will spare a few of them from the sword, famine, and plague, so that in the nations where they go, they may acknowledge all their detestable practices. Then they will know that I am the Lord. These survivors would serve as witnesses, telling the nations about their sins and about God's justice. Through their testimony, other nations would understand that Israel's punishment came from their own rebellion, not from God's weakness. Chapter 13 brought God's judgment against the false prophets and prophetesses who were leading the people astray with lying visions and false comfort. These religious leaders were telling people exactly what they wanted to hear, instead of what they needed to hear. Son of man, prophesy against the prophets of Israel who are now prophesying. Say to those who prophesy out of their own imagination, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Woe to the foolish prophets who follow their own spirit and have seen nothing. These false prophets weren't receiving real visions from God. Instead, they were making up messages based on their own thoughts and desires. They were like jackals among ruins, destructive scavengers, feeding off the people's desperation for hope. You have not gone up to the breaches in the wall to repair it for the people of Israel so that it will stand firm in the battle on the day of the Lord. Instead of helping to fix the spiritual problems that were bringing judgment, they were making things worse by encouraging people to continue in their sin. The false prophets claimed their messages came from God, but their prophecies would fail completely. Have you not seen false visions and uttered lying divinations when you say, 'The Lord declares, though I have not spoken'? Because of their lies, God was against them. My hand will be against the prophets who see false visions and utter lying divinations. They will not belong to the council of my people or be listed in the records of Israel, nor will they enter the land of Israel. Then you will know that I am the sovereign Lord. The main problem with these false prophets was that they cried peace when there was no peace. They were like people who built a flimsy wall and then painted it white to make it look strong and beautiful. But when the storm of judgment came, their wall would collapse completely. Therefore this is what the sovereign Lord says: "In my wrath I will unleash a violent wind, and in my anger hailstones and torrents of rain will fall with destructive fury. I will tear down the wall you have covered with whitewash and will level it to the ground so that its foundation will be laid bare." But the false prophets weren't the only problem. There were also women who practiced divination and led people astray. Son of man, set your face against the daughters of your people who prophesy out of their own imagination. Prophesy against them and say, "This is what the sovereign Lord says. Woe to the women who sew magic charms on all their wrists and make veils of various lengths for their heads in order to ensnare people." These women were using magic and sorcery, pretending to have supernatural power over life and death. Will you ensnare the lives of my people but preserve your own? You have profaned me among my people for a few handfuls of barley and scraps of bread. By lying to my people who listen to lies, you have killed those who should not have died and have spared those who should not live. God was going to tear away their magic charms and veils, exposing their powerlessness. I will tear off your veils and save my people from your hands, and they will no longer fall prey to your power. Then you will know that I am the Lord. These false religious leaders had been discouraging the righteous with lies while encouraging the wicked to continue in their evil ways. But God would put an end to their false visions and divinations. They would no longer deceive his people with their lying messages. In chapter 14, some of the elders of Israel came to sit before Ezekiel, perhaps hoping for an encouraging word from God, but the Lord knew their hearts and had a different message for them. These leaders had set up idols in their hearts while still pretending to seek God's guidance. Son of man, these men have set up idols in their hearts and put wicked stumbling blocks before their faces. Should I let them inquire of me at all? God asked. The hypocrisy was obvious. They wanted God's blessing while holding on to their false gods at the same time. God told Ezekiel to speak directly to them. This is what the sovereign Lord says. When any of the Israelites set up idols in their hearts and put a wicked stumbling block before their faces and then go to a prophet, I, the Lord, will answer them myself in keeping with their great idolatry. Instead of giving them the comfortable message they wanted, God would answer according to their idolatrous hearts. His response would be designed to recapture the hearts of the people of Israel, who had all deserted him for their idols. Therefore say to the people of Israel, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Repent, turn from your idols, and renounce all your detestable practices. The only solution was complete repentance and turning away from everything that competed with God for their devotion. If they refused to repent, both the false prophet and the person who consulted him would bear the same punishment. They will bear their guilt. The prophet will be as guilty as the one who consults him. Then the people of Israel will no longer stray from me, nor will they defile themselves anymore with all their sins. Then God made a statement that would revolutionize how people understood his justice. Even if the land became so sinful that he had to judge it with famine, wild beasts, sword, or plague, the presence of righteous people wouldn't save the wicked. As surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, even if Noah, Daniel, and Job were in it, they could save only themselves by their righteousness. These three men were famous for their righteousness. Noah, who was saved from the flood. Daniel, who was currently serving God faithfully in Babylon. and Job, who had remained faithful through terrible suffering. But even these heroes of faith could only save themselves. If I send wild beasts through that country, and they leave it childless, and it becomes desolate, so that no one can pass through it because of the beasts, as surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, even if these 3 men were in it, they could not save their own sons or daughters. They alone would be saved, but the land would be desolate. The same principle applied to every form of judgment, sword, famine, or plague. Righteousness was personal, not transferable. Each person was responsible for their own relationship with God, and no one could ride on someone else's faith. Yet there will be some survivors, sons and daughters who will be brought out of it. They will come to you, and when you see their conduct and their actions, you will be consoled regarding the disaster I have brought on Jerusalem. Every disaster I have brought on it. You will be consoled when you see their conduct and their actions, for you will know that I have done nothing in it without cause, declares the sovereign Lord. Even in judgment, God's actions would be proven just. The survivors would demonstrate by their own evil conduct that the city deserved everything that happened to it. Chapter 15 brought a simple but devastating parable that showed exactly what Jerusalem had become in God's eyes. The word of the Lord came to Ezekiel with a question about the wood of a vine compared to other trees. Son of man, how is the wood of a vine different from that of a branch from any of the trees in the forest? Is wood ever taken from it to make anything useful? Do they make pegs from it to hang things on? The answer was obvious. Vinewood was useless for construction or tools. Unlike oak or cedar that could be used to build houses or make furniture, vinewood was too soft and weak for any practical purpose. The only thing you could do with vinewood was burn it for fuel, and after it is thrown on the fire as fuel and the fire burns both ends and chars the middle, is it then useful for anything? If it was not useful for anything when it was whole, how much less can it be made into something useful when the fire has burned it and it is charred? This parable had a specific application to Jerusalem. God had chosen Israel to be like a vine that would produce fruit, but instead of producing good grapes, they had become completely useless. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says: as I have given the wood of the vine among the trees of the forest as fuel for the fire, so will I treat the people living in Jerusalem. Jerusalem wasn't just failing to live up to its potential, it had become actively harmful and worthless. Like vinewood that couldn't even be used for construction, the city had no redeeming value left in its current state. I will set my face against them. Although they have come out of the fire will yet consume them. And when I set my face against them, you will know that I am the Lord. Some of the people had already experienced judgment and suffering, but instead of learning from it, they had continued in their rebellion. They were like partially burned wood that was even more useless than before. The city that was supposed to be a light to the nations had become nothing but fuel for the fire of judgment. I will make the land desolate because they have been unfaithful, declares the sovereign Lord. Their unfaithfulness had turned them from a fruitful vine into worthless wood fit only for burning. Chapter 16 contained one of the most shocking and detailed allegories in the entire Bible. God told the story of Jerusalem as if she were a woman, tracing her history from birth to her current state of spiritual adultery. This wasn't a gentle parable, it was a brutal exposure of just how far God's people had fallen. Son of man, confront Jerusalem with her detestable practices and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says to Jerusalem. Your ancestry and birth were in the land of the Canaanites. Your father was an Amorite and your mother a Hittite. The story began with Jerusalem as an abandoned baby. On the day you were born, your cord was not cut, nor were you washed with water to make you clean, nor were you rubbed with salt or wrapped in cloths. No one looked on you with pity or had compassion enough to do any of these things for you. Rather, you were thrown out into the open field, for on the day you were born, you were despised. This abandoned baby was dying when God found her. Then I passed by and saw you kicking about in your blood, and as you lay there in your blood, I said to you, live. And I made you grow like a plant of the field. You grew and developed and entered puberty. Your breasts had formed and your hair had grown, yet you were stark naked. When the girl reached marriageable age, God came to her again. Later I passed by, and when I looked at you and saw that you were old enough for love, I spread the corner of my garment over you and covered your naked body. I gave you my solemn oath and entered into a covenant with you, declares the sovereign Lord, and you became mine. God then lavished gifts on his bride, giving her the finest clothes, jewelry, and food. I clothed you with an embroidered dress and put sandals of fine leather on you. I dressed you in fine linen and covered you with costly garments. I adorned you with jewelry. I put bracelets on your arms and a necklace around your neck, and I put a ring on your nose, earrings on your ears, and a beautiful crown on your head. She became incredibly beautiful and famous among the nations. And your fame spread among the nations on account of your beauty, because the splendor I had given you made your beauty perfect, declares the sovereign Lord. But then came the tragic turn. But you trusted in your beauty and used your fame to become a prostitute. You lavished your favors on anyone who passed by, and your beauty became his. Instead of being grateful for God's love and faithfulness, Jerusalem used the gifts he had given her to attract other lovers. She took the very clothes God had given her and made shrines where she could worship other gods. She took the gold and silver jewelry he had provided and made male idols to worship. She even took their children, the people God had blessed them with, and sacrificed them to these false gods. You took your sons and daughters whom you bore to me and sacrificed them as food to the idols. Was your prostitution not enough? You slaughtered my children and delivered them up as offerings by causing them to pass through the fire. But the worst part was that Jerusalem wasn't even like a normal prostitute who at least got paid for her services. You are the opposite of other women. No one runs after you for your favors. You are the very opposite, for you give payment and none is given to you. She was paying other nations to accept her worship of their gods. She was giving away God's blessings to chase after relationships that would ultimately destroy her. It was the complete reversal of how marriage was supposed to work. Because of this betrayal, God would gather all her lovers and expose her shame before them. I will gather all your lovers, with whom you found pleasure, those you loved as well as those you hated. I will gather them against you from all around, and will strip you in front of them, and they will see you stark naked. The very nation she had tried to please by abandoning God would become the instruments of her judgment. They would destroy her wealth, tear down her high places, strip off her clothes, take away her jewelry, and leave her naked and bare. Chapter 17 brought another parable. This one about two great eagles and a vine. This story would explain the political situation that was leading to Jerusalem's destruction and why King Zedekiah's rebellion against Babylon was both foolish and sinful. Son of man, set forth an allegory and tell it to the Israelites as a parable. Say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. A great eagle with powerful wings, long feathers and full plumage of varied colors came to Lebanon. Taking hold of the top of a cedar, he broke off its topmost shoot and carried it away to a land of merchants, where he planted it in a city of traders. The first eagle represented Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. The top of the cedar was King Jehoiakim, who had been taken to Babylon in the first deportation. The land of merchants was Babylon itself, a nation famous for its trade and commerce. He took one of the seedlings of the land and put it in fertile soil. He planted it like a willow by abundant water, and it sprouted and became a low, spreading vine. Its branches turned toward him, but its roots remained under it. So it became a vine and produced branches and put out leafy boughs. The seedling was Zedekiah, whom Nebuchadnezzar had made king in Jerusalem. He was supposed to be a low, spreading vine, a king who would remain humble and loyal to Babylon, with his roots firmly planted under Babylonian authority. But there was another eagle, great of wing and many of feathers. And behold, this vine bent its roots toward him and shot forth its branches toward him from the bed where it was planted, that he might water it. The second eagle was Egypt. Instead of remaining content with the good situation Babylon had provided, Zedekiah was secretly turning to Egypt for help, hoping to break free from Babylonian control. It had been planted in good soil by abundant water, so that it would produce branches, bear fruit, and become a splendid vine. There was no need for the vine to seek another source of water. Babylon had provided everything necessary for Judah to prosper under their protection. God then asked the crucial question, "Say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Will it thrive? Will he not uproot and strip off its fruit so that it withers? All its new growth will wither. It will not take a strong arm or many people to pull it up by the roots. The rebellion would fail completely." Zedekiah's attempt to break free from Babylon with Egypt's help would only result in total destruction. It has been planted, but will it thrive? Will it not wither completely when the east wind strikes it, wither away in the plot where it grew? Then God explained the meaning clearly. "Say to this rebellious people, do you not know what these things mean? Say to them, the king of Babylon went to Jerusalem and carried off her king and her nobles, bringing them back with him to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar had made a treaty with Zedekiah, expecting loyalty in return for the privilege of remaining on the throne. Then he took a member of the royal family and made a treaty with him, putting him under oath. He also carried away the leading men of the land, so that the kingdom would be brought low, unable to rise again, surviving only by keeping his treaty. But Zedekiah had broken this covenant by sending envoys to Egypt to get horses and a large army. But the king rebelled against him by sending his envoys to Egypt to get horses and a large army. Will he succeed? Will he who does such things escape? Will he break the treaty and yet escape? God's answer was absolutely clear. "As surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, he shall die in Babylon, in the land of the king who put him on the throne, whose oath he despised and whose treaty he broke." Egypt wouldn't be able to help when Babylon returned with siege ramps and weapons to destroy many lives. Zedekiah would die in Babylon because he had despised the oath and broken the covenant, even though he had given his hand in pledge. The story ended with a promise of hope for the distant future. God himself would take a shoot from the very top of a cedar and plant it on a high mountain. "On the mountain heights of Israel I will plant it. It will produce branches and bear fruit and become a splendid cedar. Birds of every kind will nest in it. They will find shelter in the shade of its branches." This was a promise about the Messiah, who would one day establish a kingdom that would provide shelter and blessing for people from every nation. "Then all the trees of the forest will know that I, the Lord, bring down the tall tree and make the low tree grow tall. I dry up the green tree and make the dry tree flourish." Chapter 18 began with God addressing a popular saying that people were using to excuse their behavior and blame their situation on their ancestors. "The word of the Lord came to me. What do you mean by repeating this proverb concerning the land of Israel? The parents eat sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge." People were claiming that they were suffering for their fathers' sins, rather than taking responsibility for their own choices. But God completely rejected this excuse. "As surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, you will no longer quote this proverb in Israel. For everyone belongs to me, the parent as well as the child. Both alike belong to me. The one who sins is the one who will die." To illustrate this principle, God gave 3 examples spanning 3 generations. First was a righteous man. Suppose there is a righteous man who does what is just and right. He does not eat at the mountain shrines or look to the idols of Israel. He does not defile his neighbor's wife or have sexual relations with a woman during her monthly period. This righteous man treated people fairly. returned what he took in pledge for a loan, didn't rob anyone, gave food to the hungry and clothes to the naked. He stayed away from wrongdoing, judged fairly between people, and followed God's laws. Such a person is righteous. They will surely live, declares the sovereign Lord. But what if this righteous man had a violent son? Suppose he has a violent son who sheds blood or does any of these other things, though the father has done none of them. He eats at the mountain shrines. He defiles his neighbor's wife. He oppresses the poor and needy. He commits robbery. He does not return what he took in pledge. He looks to the idols. He does detestable things. Would this wicked son be saved because of his father's righteousness? Absolutely not. Will such a man live? He will not. Because he has done all these detestable things, he is to be put to death. His blood will be on his own head. But the story continued with a third generation. What if this wicked man had a son who saw his father's evil ways but chose to live differently? But suppose this son has a son who sees all the sins his father commits, and though he sees them, he does not do such things. This grandson chose to be righteous despite his father's example. He didn't eat at mountain shrines, look to idols, defile his neighbor's wife, oppress anyone, or commit robbery. Instead, he provided food for the hungry and clothes for the naked, and followed God's laws. Will he die for his father's sin? He will not, since he has done what is just and right and has been careful to keep all my decrees. He will surely live. The one who sins is the one who will die. The child will not share the guilt of the parent, nor will the parent share the guilt of the child. The righteousness of the righteous will be credited to them, and the wickedness of the wicked will be charged against them. This principle of individual responsibility meant that change was always possible. But if a wicked person turns away from all the sins they have committed and keeps all my decrees and does what is just and right, that person will surely live. They will not die. None of the offenses they have committed will be remembered against them. Because of the righteous things they have done, they will live. God took no pleasure in punishing the wicked. Do I take any pleasure in the death of the wicked? Declares the sovereign Lord. Rather, am I not pleased when they turn from their ways and live? The same principle worked in reverse. If a righteous person turned away from righteousness and committed sin, all their previous righteous acts wouldn't save them. If a righteous person turns from their righteousness and commits sin and does the same detestable things the wicked person does, will they live? None of the righteous things that person has done will be remembered. Because of the unfaithfulness they are guilty of, and because of the sins they have committed, they will die. Chapters 19 and 20 continued this theme by looking at Israel's entire history as one long cycle of rebellion and divine patience. In chapter 20, elders came to inquire of the Lord, but God told Ezekiel not to let them inquire. Instead, he was to confront them with their history. Will you judge them? Will you judge them, Son of Man? Then confront them with the detestable practices of their ancestors and say to them, "This is what the sovereign Lord says. On the day I chose Israel, I swore with uplifted hand to the descendants of Jacob and revealed myself to them in Egypt. With uplifted hand I said to them, I am the Lord your God." Even in Egypt, before they were freed from slavery, God had told them to get rid of their idols. I said to them, "Each of you, get rid of the vile images you have set your eyes on, and do not defile yourselves with the idols of Egypt. I'm the Lord your God." But they rebelled even then and were unwilling to listen. In the wilderness, God gave them his laws and Sabbaths as signs between him and them. But again they rebelled. Yet the people of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not follow my decrees, but rejected my laws, by which the person who obeys them will live, and they utterly desecrated my Sabbaths. The pattern continued with their children in the wilderness, and again when they entered the promised land. But they rebelled against me and would not listen to me. They did not get rid of the vile images they had set their eyes on, nor did they forsake the idols of Egypt. Throughout their entire history, from Egypt to the present moment, Israel had been in constant rebellion against God. The only reason they still existed was because of God's patience and his concern for his own reputation among the nations. He had restrained his anger again and again, not because they deserved it, but for the sake of his name. The word of the Lord came to Ezekiel with one of the most terrifying images in all of Scripture, God's sword being drawn from its sheath, ready for battle. In chapter 21, God told him to face south and preach against the sanctuaries there. Son of man, set your face toward the south. Preach against the south and prophesy against the forest of the southland. When Ezekiel complained that people were saying he only spoke in riddles, God gave him a much clearer message. Son of man, set your face against Jerusalem and preach against the sanctuary. Prophesy against the land of Israel and say to her, this is what the Lord says, I am against you. I will draw my sword from its sheath and cut off from you both the righteous and the wicked. The sword wouldn't make any distinctions. Everyone from south to north would feel its blade. Because I am going to cut off the righteous and the wicked, my sword will be unsheathed against everyone from south to north. Then all people will know that I, the Lord, have drawn my sword from its sheath. It will not return again. Then came the sword song, a chilling poem about God's weapon of judgment, a sword. A sword sharpened and polished, sharpened for the slaughter, polished to flash like lightning. The most dramatic part came when God described Nebuchadnezzar standing at the crossroads, trying to decide whether to attack Jerusalem or Ammon first. The king of Babylon will stop at the fork in the road, at the junction of the two roads, to seek an omen. He will cast lots with arrows. He will consult his idols. He will examine the liver. Into his right hand would come the lot for Jerusalem, telling him to set up battering rams and raise the battle. Chapter 22 presented the most complete list of Jerusalem's sins found anywhere in the Bible. God told Ezekiel to confront the bloody city with all her detestable practices, creating a comprehensive indictment that would justify the coming judgment. Son of man, will you judge her? Will you judge this city of bloodshed? Then confront her with all her detestable practices and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. You city that brings on herself doom by shedding blood in her midst and defiles herself by making idols. The bloodshed wasn't just occasional violence, it was systematic murder that had filled the streets. You have despised my holy things and desecrated my Sabbaths. In you are people who slander to cause bloodshed. In you are those who eat at the mountain shrines and commit lewd acts. The sexual immorality was rampant and extreme. Men were committing adultery with their neighbors' wives, defiling their daughters-in-law, and violating their own sisters. The most basic laws of decency and family relationships had been completely abandoned. In you, people accept bribes to shed innocent blood. You take interest and make a profit from the poor, and extort unjust gain from your neighbors. And you have forgotten me, declares the sovereign Lord. The economic oppression was systematic and cruel. The wealthy were taking advantage of the poor through unfair interest rates and illegal profits. Judges were accepting bribes to condemn innocent people to death. The religious leaders had completely failed in their duties. Her priests do violence to my law and profane my holy things. They do not distinguish between the holy and the common. God had looked for someone who would stand in the gap and defend what was right. I looked for someone among them who would build up the wall and stand before me, in the gap on behalf of the land, so I would not have to destroy it. But I found no one. Chapter 23 told the story of two sisters named Oholah and Oholibah, representing Samaria and Jerusalem. This allegory was even more shocking than previous ones, showing how both kingdoms had become spiritual prostitutes who chased after foreign nations. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man. There were two women, daughters of the same mother. They became prostitutes in Egypt, engaging in prostitution from their youth. The older was named Oholah, and her sister was Oholibah. They were mine, and gave birth to sons and daughters. Oholah is Samaria, and Oholibah is Jerusalem. Oholah, representing the northern kingdom of Samaria, was the first to chase after foreign lovers. Oholah engaged in prostitution while she was still mine, and she lusted after her lovers, the Assyrians, warriors clothed in blue, governors and commanders. Instead of trusting in God for protection, Samaria had made alliances with Assyria, adopting their customs and worshipping their gods. This spiritual adultery led to her destruction. Therefore I delivered her into the hands of her lovers, the Assyrians, for whom she lusted. But instead of learning from her sister's fate, Jerusalem became even worse. Her sister Oholibah saw this, yet in her lust and prostitution she was more depraved than her sister. Jerusalem also lusted after the Assyrians, but then she went even further. When she saw pictures of Babylonian officers on walls, she immediately sent messengers to them. After becoming disgusted with Babylon, she didn't return to God, but pursued even more degrading relationships. Because of this behavior, God would bring all her former lovers against her to execute judgment. Chapter 24 marked a turning point in Ezekiel's ministry. On a specific date, the 10th day of the 10th month in the 9th year, God told him to record the day, because it was the very day that Babylon laid siege to Jerusalem. Son of man, record this date, this very date, because the king of Babylon has laid siege to Jerusalem this very day. Tell this rebellious people a parable and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Put on the cooking pot, put it on and pour water into it. The cooking pot represented Jerusalem, and Ezekiel was to demonstrate what would happen during the siege. Put into it the pieces of meat, all the choice pieces, the leg and the shoulder. Fill it with the best of these bones. But then God revealed the real meaning. The pot was rusty and corrupt, just like the city it represented. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Woe to the city of bloodshed, to the pot now encrusted, whose deposit will not go away. The blood of innocent people spilled in Jerusalem was still there, crying out for justice. She put it on the bare rock. She did not pour it on the ground, where the dust would cover it. To stir up wrath and take revenge, I put her blood on the bare rock, so that it would not be covered. While Ezekiel was giving this prophecy, God told him something that would test his faith completely. Son of man, with one blow, I'm about to take away from you the delight of your eyes. Yet do not lament or weep or shed any tears. The delight of Ezekiel's eyes was his wife, but he was not allowed to mourn in the normal way. So I spoke to the people in the morning, and in the evening my wife died. The next morning I did as I had been commanded. When people asked what this meant, God explained that just as Ezekiel lost his wife without normal mourning, they would lose the temple and their children without being able to mourn properly. After Jerusalem's fall, God's attention turned to surrounding nations who had rejoiced over Israel's destruction. Chapter 25 began with prophecy against the Ammonites, descendants of Lot, who lived east of the Jordan River. Son of man, set your face against the Ammonites and prophesy against them. Say to them, hear the word of the sovereign Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says, because you said, Aha! Over my sanctuary when it was desecrated and over the land of Israel when it was laid waste. The Ammonites had clapped their hands and stomped their feet with joy when they saw Jerusalem destroyed. They thought this meant they could expand their territory and take over Israel's land. Therefore I am going to give you to the people of the east as a possession. Their capital city, Rabbah, would become nothing but grazing land for animals. I will turn Rabbah into a pasture for camels and Ammon into a resting place for sheep. Then you will know that I am the Lord. Next came judgment on Moab, another descendant of Lot. This is what the sovereign Lord says, because Moab and Seir said, Look, Judah has become like all the other nations. Therefore I will expose the flank of Moab. Moab's sin was dismissing Jerusalem's fall as unimportant. They said Judah was just like any other nation, denying that Israel had any special relationship with God. This attitude showed they didn't understand who God was or what he was doing in history. will give Moab along with the Ammonites to the people of the east as a possession, so that the Ammonites will not be remembered among the nations. And I will inflict punishment on Moab. Then they will know that I am the Lord. Both nations would face conquest by eastern peoples who would take over their lands completely. The prophecy then moved to Edom, descendants of Esau who had maintained bitter hatred against Israel for centuries. Their judgment would be particularly severe because of their long history of revenge. This is what the Sovereign Lord says. Because Edom took revenge on Judah and became very guilty by doing so, therefore this is what the Sovereign Lord says. I will stretch out my hand against Edom and kill both man and beast. Edom's sin wasn't just celebrating Jerusalem's fall, it was actively taking revenge. When Judah was weakest and most vulnerable, the Edomites had attacked them, capturing refugees and handing them over to their enemies. I will take vengeance on Edom by the hand of my people Israel, and they will deal with Edom in accordance with my anger and my wrath. They will know my vengeance, declares the Sovereign Lord. Unlike other nations destroyed by foreign armies, Edom would face judgment specifically through Israel. When God's people were restored, they would execute justice against Edom for their treachery. The final judgment fell on the Philistines, Israel's ancient enemies along the Mediterranean coast. This is what the Sovereign Lord says. Because the Philistines acted in vengeance and took revenge with malice in their hearts, and with ancient hostility sought to destroy Judah. The Philistines had maintained their hatred of Israel for generations, never missing an opportunity to attack when Israel was weak. Their malice came from ancient hostility, a grudge going back hundreds of years. I will carry out great vengeance on them and punish them in my wrath. Then they will know that I am the Lord when I take vengeance on them. Their coastal cities would be completely destroyed, and the nation that had been Israel's enemy since the judges would finally be eliminated forever. Chapters 26 and 27 contain detailed prophecies against Tyre, the great trading city that controlled much of the ancient world's commerce. Located on an island off Lebanon's coast, Tyre seemed impossible to conquer and had grown wealthy through international trade. In the 11th month of the 12th year, on the 1st of the month, the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, because Tyre has said of Jerusalem, Aha! The gate to the nations is broken, and its doors have swung open to me. Now that she lies in ruins, I will prosper. Tyre's sin was economic opportunism. When Jerusalem fell, they saw it as a business opportunity. With Jerusalem destroyed, Tyre expected to capture all its trade routes and become even richer. Therefore, this is what the Sovereign Lord says. I am against you, Tyre, and I will bring many nations against you. Like the sea casting up its waves, they will destroy the walls of Tyre and pull down her towers. I will scrape away her rubble and make her a bare rock. The prophecy was specific and shocking. This great city would be so completely destroyed that nothing would be left but bare rock. Where magnificent buildings once stood, fishermen would spread their nets to dry, for this is what the Sovereign Lord says. From the north, I am going to bring against Tyre Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, king of kings, with horses and chariots, with horsemen and a great army. The first wave of destruction would come through Nebuchadnezzar, who would besiege the city with all Babylon's military might. He would build siege ramps, set up battering rams, and attack with cavalry and infantry. Chapter 27 contained a detailed lament over Tyre's destruction, describing the city as a beautiful ship that would be wrecked in the heart of the seas. The chapter listed all the different nations who traded with Tyre, showing how its destruction would affect the entire ancient world. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, take up a lament concerning Tyre. Say to Tyre, situated at the gateway to the sea, merchant of peoples on many coasts. The lament described Tyre as a magnificent ship built from the finest materials. Planks of juniper from Lebanon, cedar masts, oak oars and cypress decks inlaid with ivory. Men from many nations served as crew, soldiers and traders, but this beautiful ship would be wrecked by the east wind. Your wealth, merchandise and wares, your mariners, sailors and shipwrights, your merchants and all your soldiers will sink into the heart of the seas on the day of your shipwreck. Chapter 28 brought judgment against Tyre's human ruler and the spiritual power behind him, while chapters 29 and 30 began 7 prophecies against Egypt. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, say to the ruler of Tyre, this is what the sovereign Lord says. In the pride of your heart you say, I am a god. I sit on the throne of a god in the heart of the seas, but you are a mere mortal and not a god. The prince of Tyre had become so proud of his wisdom and wealth that he actually claimed to be divine. He thought his island location made him untouchable, like a god dwelling in the seas. By your wisdom and understanding, you have gained wealth for yourself and amassed gold and silver in your treasuries. By your great skill in trading, you have increased your wealth, and because of your wealth, your heart has become proud. His trading wisdom had made him incredibly rich, but this success had led to fatal pride. He had begun thinking his abilities made him equal to God himself. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says, because you think you are wise as a god, I am going to bring foreigners against you, the most ruthless of nations. They will draw their swords against your beauty and wisdom. Foreigners would kill him, and he would die the death of the uncircumcised in the heart of the seas. When his killers confronted him, would he still claim to be a god? The chapter then shifted to address the spiritual power behind the human ruler, a figure described in terms that went far beyond any earthly king. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. This being had been a guardian cherub, perfect in his ways from creation until wickedness was found in him. Through widespread trade, he became filled with violence and sinned, so God cast him out from the mountain of God. The prophecies then turned to Egypt in chapter 29, with the first of 7 oracles against Pharaoh and his kingdom. In the 10th year, in the 10th month, on the 12th day, the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, set your face against Pharaoh king of Egypt, and prophesy against him and against all Egypt. Egypt was described as a great monster lying among the Nile streams, claiming the river belonged to him, and that he had made it himself. But God would put hooks in his jaws and pull him out with all the fish. I will leave you in the desert, you and all the fish of your streams. You will fall on the open field and not be gathered or picked up. Egypt would become a desolate wasteland for 40 years, and the Egyptians would be scattered among the nations. After 40 years, God would gather them back, but they would be the lowliest of kingdoms and would never again rule over other nations. In the 11th year, in the 3rd month on the 1st day, the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel with another prophecy against Egypt. This time God would use the story of a great tree to show Pharaoh what was coming to his kingdom. Son of man, say to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and to his hordes, who can be compared with you in majesty? Consider Assyria, once a cedar in Lebanon, with beautiful branches overshadowing the forest. It towered on high, its top above the thick foliage. God told the story of Assyria as a warning to Egypt. Assyria had once been like a magnificent cedar tree in Lebanon, the most beautiful and powerful nation in the world. The waters nourished it, deep springs made it grow tall, and streams flowed around its base to water all the trees of the field. So it towered higher than all the trees of the field. Its boughs increased and its branches grew long, spreading because of abundant water. All the birds of the sky nested in its boughs. All the animals of the wild gave birth under its branches. All the great nations lived in its shade. This cedar was beautiful in its greatness, with its long branches spreading far because its roots went down to abundant water. No tree in God's garden could match its beauty. The cedars in Lebanon couldn't rival it. The junipers couldn't equal its boughs, and the plane trees couldn't compare with its branches. It was majestic in beauty, with its spreading boughs, for its roots went down to abundant water. The cedars in the garden of God could not rival it, nor could the junipers equal its boughs, nor could the plane trees compare with its branches. No tree in the garden of God could match its beauty. God had made this tree beautiful with abundant branches, and all the trees of Eden envied it. But then came the turning point in the story. Despite all its beauty and power, this great cedar fell because of pride. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Because the great cedar towered on high, lifting its top above the thick foliage, and because it was proud of its height, I gave it into the hands of the ruler of the nations, for him to deal with according to its wickedness. The most ruthless of foreign nations cut it down and left it. Its branches fell on the mountains and in all the valleys, and its boughs lay broken in all the ravines of the land. All the nations of the earth came out from under its shade and left it. All the birds settled on the fallen tree, and all the wild animals lived among its branches. Therefore no other trees by the waters are ever to tower proudly on high, lifting their tops above the thick foliage. The lesson was clear for Egypt. Just as Assyria had been the greatest nation on earth but was cut down because of pride, so Egypt would face the same fate. On the day it was brought down to the realm of the dead, I covered the deep springs with mourning for it. I held back its streams, and its abundant waters were restrained. When the great cedar fell, it shook the nations. Lebanon was clothed with gloom, and all the trees of the field withered away. I made the nations tremble at the sound of its fall, when I brought it down to the realm of the dead, to be with those who go down to the pit. Now Pharaoh needed to understand which tree he was in this story. Which of the trees of Eden can be compared with you in splendor and majesty? Yet you too will be brought down with the trees of Eden to the earth below. You will lie among the uncircumcised, with those killed by the sword. Chapter 32 contained 2 funeral songs for Pharaoh and Egypt, written as if the great king had already died and been buried. These weren't just prophecies. They were advance funeral dirges for a kingdom that thought it would last forever. In the 12th year, in the 12th month on the first day, the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, take up a lament concerning Pharaoh king of Egypt, and say to him, You are like a lion among the nations. You are like a monster in the seas, thrashing about in your streams, churning the water with your feet and muddying the streams. The first lament described how God would catch this monster with a great net. This is what the sovereign Lord says, With a great throng of people I will cast my net over you, and they will haul you up in my net. I will throw you on the land and hurl you on the open field. All the birds of the sky would settle on the dead monster, and all the animals of the wild would gorge themselves on its flesh. God would spread its flesh on the mountains and fill the valleys with its remains. The land would be soaked with its flowing blood all the way to the mountains. When I snuff you out, I will cover the heavens and darken their stars. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon will not give its light. All the shining lights in the heavens I will darken over you. I will bring darkness over your land, declares the sovereign Lord. The destruction would be so complete that even the heavens would mourn. God would trouble the hearts of many peoples when he brought news of Egypt's destruction among the nations. To countries they had never known, I will cause many peoples to be appalled at you, and their kings will shudder with horror because of you when I brandish my sword before them. On the day of your downfall, each of them will tremble every moment for his life. The second lament came 2 weeks later, describing Pharaoh's descent into the realm of the dead. In the 12th year, on the 15th day of the month, the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, wail for the hordes of Egypt, and consign to the earth below both her and the daughters of mighty nations, along with those who go down to the pit. In this vision, Egypt would join all the other great nations that had already fallen. Are you more favored than others? Go down and be laid among the uncircumcised. They will fall among those killed by the sword. One by one, Ezekiel described the great powers already in the grave. Assyria is there with her whole army. She is surrounded by the graves of all her slain, all who have fallen by the sword. Their graves are in the depths of the pit, and her army lies around her grave. Elam was there with all her hordes around her grave. All of them were slain, fallen by the sword. Meshech and Tubal were there with all their hordes around their graves. The warriors of old who went down to the realm of the dead with their weapons of war were there too. But you are broken and lie among the uncircumcised with those killed by the sword. Edom is there, her kings and all her princes. Despite their power, they are laid with those killed by the sword. Egypt would join this company of fallen nations, lying among the uncircumcised with those killed by the sword. Pharaoh and all his army would be slain by the sword, declares the sovereign Lord. After Jerusalem had fallen and the exiles had received the devastating news, God renewed Ezekiel's calling as a watchman. Chapter 33 marked a new phase in his ministry, moving from judgment to hope, from destruction to restoration. Son of man, speak to your people and say to them, when I bring the sword against a land, and the people of the land choose one of their men and make him their watchman, and he sees the sword coming against the land and blows the trumpet to warn the people. God explained the watchman's responsibility in detail. If the watchman saw danger coming and warned the people, then anyone who heard the trumpet but didn't take warning would be responsible for their own death. But if the watchman saw the sword coming and didn't blow the trumpet to warn the people, then their blood would be on the watchman's head. Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the people of Israel. So hear the word I speak and give them warning from me. When I say to the wicked, you wicked person, you will surely die, and you do not speak out to dissuade them from their ways, that wicked person will die for their sin, and I will hold you accountable for their blood. The message was both sobering and hopeful. Ezekiel was responsible for delivering God's warnings, but each person was responsible for their own response. But if you do warn the wicked person to turn from their ways, and they do not do so, they will die for their sin, though you yourself will be saved. Then God addressed the people's despair directly. Son of man, say to the Israelites, this is what you are saying. Our offenses and sins weigh us down, and we are wasting away because of them. How then can we live? The people felt hopeless, crushed under the weight of their guilt and the consequences of their rebellion. But God's heart was revealed in his response. Say to them, as surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, I take no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but rather that they turn from their ways and live. Turn from your evil ways. Why will you die, people of Israel? God didn't want anyone to perish. His desire was for people to repent and live. The principle of individual responsibility was repeated again. The righteousness of the righteous wouldn't save them if they turned to sin, and the wickedness of the wicked wouldn't condemn them if they turned from their evil ways. Yet you say, the way of the Lord is not just, but I will judge each of you according to your own ways. God's justice was perfect even when people couldn't understand it. Each person would be judged according to their own choices, not according to what others had done. In the 12th year of exile, in the 10th month on the 5th day, a man who had escaped from Jerusalem came to Ezekiel with news that the city had fallen. The evening before the man arrived, the hand of the Lord was on Ezekiel, and his mouth was opened, so he was no longer silent. With Jerusalem's fall confirmed, some people thought they could now claim the abandoned land for themselves. But God had a message for these opportunists too. Son of man, the people living in those ruins in the land of Israel are saying, Abraham was only one man, yet he possessed the land. But we are many. Surely the land has been given to us as our possession. God's response was direct and challenging. These people who wanted to claim the land were still living in the same sins that had brought judgment in the first place. They ate meat with blood still in it, looked to their idols, and shed blood. How could they expect to possess the land while continuing in rebellion? Chapter 34 brought one of the most comforting prophecies in all of Ezekiel. After all, the judgment and destruction, God finally spoke about his heart for his scattered people and his plan to gather them back. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says to you shepherds. Woe to you shepherds of Israel who only take care of yourselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? The leaders of Israel had been like bad shepherds who cared only for themselves. You eat the curds, clothe yourselves with the wool, and slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of the flock. You have not strengthened the weak, or healed the sick, or bound up the injured. Instead of caring for the people God had entrusted to them, these leaders had used their positions for personal gain. You have not brought back the strays or searched for the lost. You have ruled them harshly and brutally, so they were scattered because there was no shepherd, and when they were scattered, they became food for all the wild animals. The result was disaster. God's sheep wandered over all the mountains and on every high hill. They were scattered over the whole earth, and no one searched or looked for them. The very people who should have protected and guided them had abandoned them to fend for themselves. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. As surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, because my flock lacks a shepherd, and so has been plundered and has become food for all the wild animals, and because my shepherds did not search for my flock but cared for themselves rather than for my flock. God's anger burned against these false shepherds. This is what the sovereign Lord says, I am against the shepherds and will hold them accountable for my flock. I will remove them from tending the flock so that the shepherds can no longer feed themselves. I will rescue my flock from their mouths, and it will no longer be food for them. But the beautiful part of this chapter was what came next. Since the human shepherds had failed, God himself would become the shepherd of his people. For this is what the sovereign Lord says, I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. As a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them, so will I look after my sheep. God would rescue them from all the places where they had been scattered on a day of clouds and darkness. He would bring them out from the nations and gather them from the countries, bringing them into their own land. He would pasture them on the mountains of Israel, in the ravines, and in all the settlements in the land. I will tend them in a good pasture, and the mountain heights of Israel will be their grazing land. There they will lie down in good grazing land, and there they will feed in a rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. The care God would provide was tender and personal. I myself will tend my sheep and have them lie down, declares the sovereign Lord. I will search for the lost and bring back the strays. I will bind up the injured and strengthen the weak, but the sleek and the strong I will destroy. I will shepherd the flock with justice. God would also judge between the sheep, separating the good from the bad. As for you, my flock, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I will judge between one sheep and another, and between rams and goats. Is it not enough for you to feed on the good pasture? Must you also trample the rest of your pasture with your feet? Some of the sheep had been just as selfish as the bad shepherds, taking the best for themselves and ruining what was left for others. God would judge this behavior too and rescue the weak from those who oppress them. I will place over them one shepherd, my servant David, and he will tend them. He will tend them and be their shepherd. I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David will be prince among them. I, the Lord, have spoken. Chapter 35 turned attention back to one of Israel's enemies, Edom, the nation descended from Esau. Unlike the other nations that had been judged for rejoicing over Jerusalem's fall, Edom faced condemnation for something much deeper and more personal. Son of man, set your face against Mount Seir, prophesy against it and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says, I am against you, Mount Seir, and I will stretch out my hand against you and make you a desolate waste. Mount Seir was the mountainous region where the Edomites lived, south and east of the Dead Sea. God would make their cities ruins and lay waste their land. Then you will know that I am the Lord. But Edom's judgment wasn't just about celebrating Jerusalem's destruction. Their sin went much deeper. Because you harbored an ancient hostility and delivered the Israelites over to the sword at the time of their calamity, at the time their punishment reached its climax. The word ancient revealed the real problem. This wasn't a recent disagreement or a political dispute. Edom's hatred went all the way back to the conflict between Jacob and Esau in their mother's womb. For over 1,000 years, Edom had nursed this grudge, waiting for any opportunity to hurt Israel. When Jerusalem was at its weakest moment, facing destruction by Babylon, the Edomites had joined in the attack. Instead of helping their relatives, they had betrayed them and handed them over to their enemies. This was family turning against family at the moment of greatest need. Therefore, as surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, I will give you over to bloodshed, and it will pursue you. Since you did not hate bloodshed, bloodshed will pursue you. Edom had loved violence against their brothers, so violence would follow them wherever they went. God would make Mount Seir utterly desolate. He would fill its mountains with the slain, and people killed by the sword would fall on its hills, in its valleys, and in all its ravines. I will make you desolate forever. Your towns will not be inhabited. Then you will know that I am the Lord. The final insult was Edom's attempt to claim both Israel and Judah's territory for themselves. Because you have said, these two nations and countries will be ours, and we will take possession of them. Even though I, the Lord, was there, even though God was still present with his people, even in their exile, Edom thought they could just move in and take over the promised land. They had spoken against the mountains of Israel, saying they were desolate and given to them to devour. You boasted against me and spoke against me without restraint, and I heard it. This is what the sovereign Lord says. While the whole earth rejoices, I will make you desolate. The irony would be perfect. Just as Edom had rejoiced when Israel's inheritance became desolate, so the whole earth would rejoice when Edom became desolate. As you rejoiced when the inheritance of Israel became desolate, that is how I will treat you. You will be desolate, Mount Seir, you and all of Edom. Then they will know that I am the Lord. Chapter 36 presented a complete contrast to the judgment on Mount Seir. While Edom's mountains would become desolate forever, the mountains of Israel would become fruitful and populated again. Son of man, prophesy to the mountains of Israel and say, Mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. The enemy said of you, Aha, the ancient heights have become our possession. The nations around Israel had looked at the desolate mountains and claimed them for themselves. They thought that because Israel was in exile, the land was up for grabs. But God had heard their boastful words and their plans to divide up his land among themselves. Therefore prophesy and say, This is what the sovereign Lord says, because they ravaged and crushed you from every side, so that you became the possession of the rest of the nations and the object of people's malicious talk and slander. Therefore, mountains of Israel, hear the word of the sovereign Lord. God spoke to the mountains, hills, ravines, and valleys, to the desolate ruins and the deserted towns that had been plundered and ridiculed by the rest of the nations around them. His jealousy burned against these nations, especially against Edom, who had taken his land with wholehearted joy and utter contempt. Therefore prophesy concerning the land of Israel, and say to the mountains and hills, to the ravines and valleys, This is what the sovereign Lord says. I speak in my jealous wrath, because you have suffered the scorn of the nations. But now God would turn everything around. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I swear with uplifted hand that the nations around you will also suffer scorn. But you, mountains of Israel, will produce branches and fruit for my people Israel, for they will soon come home. The land would become productive again because God's people were coming back. I am concerned for you and will look on you with favor. You will be plowed and sown, and I will cause many people to live on you. Yes, all of Israel. The towns will be inhabited and the ruins rebuilt. God would multiply both people and animals on the mountains of Israel. They would increase and be fruitful, and he would settle people on them as in the past, and make them prosper more than before. Then you will know that I am the Lord. He would cause people to walk on the mountains again, his people Israel. They would possess the land, and it would be their inheritance. The land would never again make them childless. No longer would it be said that the land devoured its people or made the nation childless. No longer will I make you hear the taunts of the nations, and no longer will you suffer the scorn of the peoples or cause your nation to fall, declares the sovereign Lord. Then God explained why he was doing this restoration. It wasn't because Israel deserved it. In fact, they had defiled the land by their conduct and actions. Their conduct was like a woman's monthly uncleanness in his sight. So I poured out my wrath on them, because they had shed blood in the land, and because they had defiled it with their idols. I dispersed them among the nations, and they were scattered through the countries. I judged them according to their conduct and their actions. But when they went among the nations, they profaned God's holy name. Wherever they went, people said of them, "These are the Lord's people." And yet they had to leave his land. God was concerned for his holy name, which had been profaned among the nations. Therefore say to the Israelites, "This is what the sovereign Lord says. It is not for your sake, people of Israel, that I am going to do these things, but for the sake of my holy name, which you have profaned among the nations where you have gone." God would show the holiness of his great name through the restoration of his people. He would take them out of the nations, gather them from all the countries, and bring them back into their own land. Chapter 37 contained the most famous vision in the entire book of Ezekiel, the Valley of Dry Bones. This wasn't just a story about resurrection. It was God's promise that the nation of Israel, which seemed completely dead, would live again. The hand of the Lord was on me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord and set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. Ezekiel found himself in a valley completely covered with human bones. These weren't recent casualties of war. They were very dry, meaning they had been there a long time. The picture was of complete and total death, with no possibility of life returning. He asked me, "Son of man, can these bones live?" I said, "Sovereign Lord, you alone know." It was an impossible question. How could dry bones possibly come back to life? Only God could know if such a miracle was possible. Then he said to me, "Prophesy to these bones, and say to them, 'Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life.'" God told Ezekiel to preach to the bones as if they were a congregation waiting to hear God's word. The message was a promise of resurrection. "I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord." So I prophesied as I was commanded. And as I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone. I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. As Ezekiel preached, an amazing thing happened. The bones began to move, making a rattling sound as they came together. Each bone found its proper place, and then tendons appeared, followed by flesh and skin. But the bodies still had no breath in them. Then he said to me, "Prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, Son of man, and say to it, 'This is what the sovereign Lord says. Come, breath from the four winds, and breathe into these slain, that they may live.'" So Ezekiel prophesied as commanded, and breath entered the bodies. They came to life and stood up on their feet. A vast army of living people, where moments before there had been nothing but dry bones scattered across a valley floor. Then he said to me, "Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. They say, 'Our bones are dried up and our hope is gone. We are cut off.'" The vision represented the spiritual condition of the Jewish exiles. They felt completely dead as a nation, with no hope of ever returning to their land or having a future. Their bones were dried up, their hope was gone, and they were cut off from everything that had given their lives meaning. Therefore prophesy and say to them, "This is what the sovereign Lord says. My people, I'm going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel." God would perform a national resurrection, bringing his people back from the grave of exile and returning them to their own land. Then you, my people, will know that I am the Lord when I open your graves and bring you up from them. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. The vision continued with another dramatic demonstration. The word of the Lord came to me, "Son of man, take a stick of wood and write on it, belonging to Judah and the Israelites associated with him. Then take another stick of wood and write on it, belonging to Joseph, that is, to Ephraim, and all the Israelites associated with him." Ezekiel was to join the two sticks together in his hand so they would become one stick. When people asked what this meant, he was to tell them that God would take the stick of Joseph and the Israelite tribes associated with him and join it to Judah's stick, making them a single stick in his hand. Say to them, "This is what the sovereign Lord says. I will take the Israelites out of the nations where they have gone. I will gather them from all around and bring them back into their own land. I will make them one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel. The divided kingdom would be reunited under one king. They would no longer be two nations or be divided into two kingdoms. There will be one king over all of them, and they will never again be two nations or be divided into two kingdoms." Chapters 38 and 39 introduced a mysterious figure called Gog from the land of Magog, who would lead a massive invasion against the restored land of Israel. This prophecy looked far into the future, to a time when Israel would be living securely in their land again. The word of the Lord came to me, "Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Prophesy against him and say, 'This is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal.' God would put hooks in Gog's jaws and bring him out with his whole army, horses and horsemen, all of them fully armed with large and small shields, all of them brandishing their swords. With him would come Persia, Cush, and Put, all with shields and helmets, and Gomer with all its troops, and Beth Togarmah from the far north with all its troops. Get ready. Be prepared, you and all the hordes gathered about you, and take command of them. After many days you will be called to arms. In future years you will invade a land that has recovered from war, whose people were gathered from many nations to the mountains of Israel, which had long been desolate. This invasion would come at a specific time, after Israel had been restored to their land and was living in peace and security. The people would be living without walls, without gates and bars, dwelling in unwalled villages. They would be living securely, all of them without walls and without gates and bars. You will say, "I will invade a land of unwalled villages. I will attack a peaceful and unsuspecting people, all of them living without walls and without gates and bars. I will plunder and loot and turn my hand against the resettled ruins and the people gathered from the nations, rich in livestock and goods, living at the center of the land." Gog would come from his place in the far north with many nations, a great horde, a mighty army. He would advance against God's people Israel like a cloud that covers the land. "In days to come, Gog, I will bring you against my land, so that the nations may know me when I am proved holy through you before their eyes." But this invasion would be Gog's undoing. This is what the sovereign Lord says. "You are the one I spoke of in former days by my servants the prophets of Israel. At that time they prophesied for years that I would bring you against them. When Gog attacked Israel, God's fury would rise. In my zeal and fiery wrath I declare that at that time there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. The fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the beasts of the field, every creature that moves along the ground, and all the people on the face of the earth will tremble at my presence. The mountains would be overturned, the cliffs would crumble, and every wall would fall to the ground. God would summon a sword against Gog on all his mountains, and every man's sword would be against his brother. He would execute judgment on him with plague and bloodshed, and pour down torrents of rain, hailstones, and burning sulfur on him and his troops and the many nations with him. And so I will show my greatness and my holiness, and I will make myself known in the sight of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord. In the 25th year of exile, on the 10th day of the month, exactly 14 years after Jerusalem had fallen, the hand of the Lord was on Ezekiel. This was no ordinary day. It marked a quarter century since the first deportation to Babylon. In visions of God, he took me to the land of Israel and set me on a very high mountain, on whose south side were some buildings that looked like a city. He took me there, and I saw a man whose appearance was like bronze. He was standing in the gateway with a linen cord and a measuring rod in his hand. This bronze-like figure was an angel with tools for measuring. The linen cord was for longer distances, and the measuring rod was for precise details. Every measurement would be exact and significant. The man said to me, "Son of man, look carefully and listen closely and pay attention to everything I'm going to show you, for that is why you have been brought here. Tell the people of Israel everything you see." The angel made it clear that Ezekiel wasn't just a tourist, he was a reporter. Everything he saw needed to be remembered and shared with Israel. This temple would be their hope for the future. I saw a wall completely surrounding the temple area. The length of the measuring rod in the man's hand was 6 long cubits, each of which was a cubit and a hand breadth. He measured the wall. It was 1 measuring rod thick and 1 rod high. The wall was perfectly square, creating a boundary between the holy and the common. The angel began at the east gate, measuring everything precisely. The gateway had alcoves for guards, projecting walls, and a portico facing the temple. Inside the east gate were 3 alcoves on each side. The 3 had the same measurements, and the faces of the projecting walls on each side had the same measurements. The angel led Ezekiel into the outer court, where he saw 30 rooms along a pavement constructed around the court. The north and south gates had the same design as the east gate, with identical measurements and decorations. Then he brought me into the inner court through the south gate, and he measured the south gate. It had the same measurements as the others. Its alcoves, its projecting walls, and its portico had the same measurements as the others. The inner court gates faced the outer court, with palm trees decorating their jambs and 8 steps leading up to each gate. This created a sense of ascending toward heaven as worshippers moved closer to the temple. Near the inner gates were rooms for preparing sacrifices. A room with a doorway was by the portico in each of the inner gateways, where the burnt offerings were washed. In the portico of the gateway were 2 tables on each side, on which the burnt offerings, sin offerings and guilt offerings were slaughtered. Everything needed for proper worship was provided: tables for slaughtering sacrifices, rooms for washing offerings, and spaces for priests to perform their duties. He brought me to the portico of the temple and measured the jambs of the portico. They were 5 cubits wide on either side. The width of the entrance was 14 cubits, and its projecting walls were 3 cubits wide on either side. In chapter 41, they entered the main hall. Then the man brought me to the main hall and measured the jambs. The width of the jambs was 6 cubits on each side. The entrance was 10 cubits wide, and the projecting walls on each side of it were 5 cubits wide. He also measured the main hall. It was 40 cubits long and 20 cubits wide. The proportions were exactly double those of Solomon's temple, showing this new temple would be even more magnificent than the original. Chapter 43 marked the climax of the temple vision. Then the man brought me to the gate facing east, and I saw the glory of the God of Israel coming from the east. His voice was like the roar of rushing waters, and the land was radiant with his glory. This was the moment Ezekiel had waited for since witnessing God's glory departing from the original temple years earlier. The glory was the same he had seen by the Kebar River, and when judgment came to Jerusalem, the glory of the Lord entered the temple through the gate facing east. Then the Spirit lifted me up and brought me into the inner court, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. Just as God's glory had filled Solomon's temple at its dedication, now the glory filled this new temple. The building became alive with the presence of the living God. While the man was standing beside me, I heard someone speaking to me from inside the temple. He said, "Son of man, this is the place of my throne and the place for the soles of my feet. This is where I will live among the Israelites forever." This wasn't just a building, it was God's earthly throne room, the place where heaven touched earth. The defilement that had driven God from the original temple would never happen again. God told Ezekiel to describe the temple to Israel so they would be ashamed of their sins. "Son of man, describe the temple to the people of Israel, that they may be ashamed of their sins. Let them consider its perfection." The fundamental law was stated clearly. This is the law of the temple. All the surrounding area on top of the mountain will be most holy. Such is the law of the temple. The altar would be consecrated over 7 days with specific sacrifices, and then regular offerings would begin. Chapter 44 established rules for temple service. The angel brought Ezekiel back to the outer gate facing east, which was shut. The Lord said to me, "This gate is to remain shut. It must not be opened. No one may enter through it. It is to remain shut because the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered through it. Only the prince could sit in this gate for eating bread before the Lord." The first regulation concerned who could enter the sanctuary. "Say to rebellious Israel, this is what the sovereign Lord says, enough of your detestable practices, people of Israel. In the past, Israel had allowed foreigners to serve in the temple, people uncircumcised in heart and flesh. This had defiled God's sanctuary. The new rule was clear. No foreigner uncircumcised in heart and flesh is to enter my sanctuary, not even the foreigners who live among the Israelites, even among the Levites. There would be distinctions based on past faithfulness. The Levites who went far from me when Israel went astray, and who wandered from me after their idols must bear the consequences of their sin. These unfaithful Levites would serve in the sanctuary with limited duties. In contrast, the faithful Zadokite priests would receive special honor. But the Levitical priests, who are descendants of Zadok and who guarded my sanctuary when the Israelites went astray from me, are to come near to minister before me. Specific clothing requirements were established. When they enter the gates of the inner court, they are to wear linen clothes. They must not wear any woolen garment while ministering. The priests had to maintain ritual purity in dress, grooming, and personal lives. They couldn't marry widows or divorced women, only virgins or widows of priests. Chapter 45 described how the land around the temple would be organized. When you allot the land as an inheritance, you are to present to the Lord a portion of the land as a sacred district, 25,000 cubits long and 20,000 cubits wide. The entire area will be holy. This holy district would contain the sanctuary, the priests' houses, and the Levites' towns. Of this, a section 500 cubits square is to be for the sanctuary, with 50 cubits around it for open land. The city would have its own portion adjacent to the sacred district. You are to give the city as its property an area 5,000 cubits wide and 25,000 cubits long, adjacent to the sacred portion. It will belong to all Israel. The prince would receive land on both sides of the sacred district. The prince will have the land bordering each side of the area formed by the sacred district and the city property. This arrangement would prevent the prince from oppressing people by taking their land. This land will be his possession in Israel. And my princes will no longer oppress my people, but will allow the people of Israel to possess the land according to their tribes. God commanded honest weights and measures for all transactions. You are to use accurate scales, an accurate ephah, and an accurate bath. The chapter specified offerings the people should bring and established the prince's responsibility to provide burnt offerings, grain offerings, and drink offerings at festivals, new moons, and Sabbaths. Chapter 46 provided detailed instructions for the prince's role in temple worship. This is what the sovereign Lord says: the gate of the inner court facing east is to be shut on the 6 working days. But on the Sabbath day and on the day of the new moon it is to be opened. The prince had specific responsibilities. On Sabbaths and new moons, the prince is to enter from the outside through the portico of the gateway and stand by the gatepost. The priests are to sacrifice his burnt offering and his fellowship offerings. The common people would also worship at this gateway. On the Sabbaths and new moons, the people of the land are to worship in the presence of the Lord at the entrance of that gateway. Specific offerings were required for different occasions. The burnt offering the prince brings to the Lord on the Sabbath day is to be 6 male lambs and a ram, all without defect. For the common people, there was a specific traffic pattern. When the people of the land come before the Lord at the appointed festivals, whoever enters by the north gate to worship is to go out the south gate, and whoever enters by the south gate is to go out the north gate. The prince was to be among his people during celebrations. The prince is to be among them, going in when they go in and going out when they go out. Daily burnt offerings were specified. Every day you are to provide a year-old lamb without defect for a burnt offering to the Lord. Morning by morning you shall provide it. The prince's inheritance had special rules to prevent permanent loss of royal land. Finally, the angel showed Ezekiel kitchens where sacrificial meals would be prepared. Chapter 47 began with one of Scripture's most beautiful images, water flowing from the temple threshold. The man brought me back to the entrance to the temple, and I saw water coming out from under the threshold of the temple toward the east, for the temple faced east. As the angel led Ezekiel along the bank, the river grew deeper and wider. The angel measured off 1,000 cubits, and the water was ankle deep. Another 1,000 cubits, and it was knee deep. Another 1,000, and it was waist deep. He measured off another 1,000. But now it was a river that I could not cross, because the water had risen and was deep enough to swim in, a river that no one could cross. The angel explained the significance. This water flows toward the eastern region and goes down into the Arabah, where it enters the Dead Sea. When it empties into the sea, the salty water there becomes fresh. This river would bring life wherever it flowed. Swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river flows. There will be large numbers of fish because this water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. Fishermen would stand along the shore and fruit trees would grow on both banks. Fruit trees of all kinds will grow on both banks of the river. Their leaves will not wither, nor will their fruit fail. Every month they will bear fruit, because the water from the sanctuary flows to them. The angel then described the boundaries of the restored land, running from the Mediterranean Sea to various points north, east, and south. You are to distribute this land among yourselves, according to the tribes of Israel. You are to allot it as an inheritance for yourselves, and for the foreigners residing among you and who have children. Remarkably, foreigners with children would be treated as native-born Israelites and receive inheritance among the tribes. Chapter 48 provided final details of how the land would be divided among the 12 tribes and described the holy city at the center of the sacred district. These are the tribes listed by name. At the northern frontier, Dan will have one portion. The tribal allotments were listed from north to south. Dan, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Ephraim, Reuben, and Judah each received equal strips running from east to west. Bordering the territory of Judah from east to west will be the portion you are to present as a special gift. It will be 25,000 cubits wide, and its length from east to west will equal one of the tribal portions. The sanctuary will be in the center of it. This special portion contained the sacred district with the temple, city, and land for priests and Levites. The special portion you are to offer to the Lord will be 25,000 cubits long and 10,000 cubits wide. This will be the sacred portion for the priests. The Zadokite priests would receive the central portion with the sanctuary in the center. The Levites would receive an adjacent area of equal size. Neither could sell or exchange this sacred land. The city would occupy the remaining area, perfectly square and measuring 4,500 cubits on each side, with pasture lands extending 250 cubits in all directions. South of the sacred district, the remaining tribes would receive their portions: Benjamin, Simeon, Issachar, Zebulun, and Gad. The chapter concluded with the holy city's description. These will be the exits of the city, beginning on the north side, which is 4,500 cubits long. The gates of the city will be named after the tribes of Israel. Each side would have 3 gates, making 12 total, 1 for each tribe. On the east side will be 3 gates: the gate of Joseph, the gate of Benjamin, and the gate of Dan. On the south side will be 3 gates: the gate of Simeon, the gate of Issachar, and the gate of Zebulun. On the west side will be 3 gates: the gate of Gad, the gate of Asher, and the gate of Naphtali. The distance around the entire city would be 18,000 cubits, making it a perfect square. But the most important detail was saved for last. And the name of the city from that time on will be "The Lord is There." If this journey through Ezekiel has opened your eyes to see God's heart in a new way, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and join our community of Bible explorers. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that God never gives up on his people, and let me know in the comments, which vision from Ezekiel impacted you the most? Was it the valley of dry bones, the river of life, or maybe that final promise that God himself will dwell with his people forever? Until next time, remember, no matter where you are in your story, God's glory is always moving toward restoration. He's always calling his people home.